Well, we're going to take our text predominantly from Genesis chapter 16. Let me get over there. And while you're going there, I'll just give you a brief review. We were talking last week about Hagar and Ishmael and how all of those turn of events got into the earth between them because Hagar or Sarah got anxious. They had left the land of Canaan. They had been waiting for 10 years for the a promise of their son Isaac. And I understand, 10 years is a long time to wait for a promise, and I'm pretty sure things were starting to look rather grim. They were 70 or 80 and 90 years old, and they had not yet received this promise. And so Sarah concocted a scheme to give her husband away. She gave him to her handmaiden, and she did it as a measure of control. She wanted to keep control because in those days, they had multiple wives, and she wasn't going to bring all that type of static and energy in on herself. So she used her maid to bear a child, to be a surrogate. That was the first surrogate in the earth, and we now see it being replicated in certain circumstances. And so it was wrong, and she, the maid Hagar, got huffy. She got puffed up because she had this child on the way, and she got out of order with her mistress, with Hagar, with Sarah, and Sarah put her out. And so there are three things that I want to learn, and I want you all to learn from the life of Sarah when she did this. In those days, I want you to know, in those days, it was a reproach to not have a child or to not be able to bear a child. And oftentimes the blame was placed on the women. Remember, they didn't have technology and stuff like what we have today to really discern who was at fault, if it was his fault, because sometimes it is on the man's end. And so, but nevertheless, Sarah felt responsible to try to do something to get this child for Abraham in the earth. And so let's start reading in Genesis 16, 5 through 6. And Sarah said unto Abraham, my wrong be upon you. I have given you my maid into your bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judged between me and you. So this is what I was saying. She despised Sarah for a while. I thought that she didn't like being used like that. She was innocent in this situation, and her life was taken in a whole nother direction because of somebody else's stuff. But I later found out through study and scholars that she got puffed up, she got haughty, she got exalted, and she got out of order with the boss, and she ended up evicted. And so let's move on further to the 7th verse, and we'll read through the 11th. And so I don't want to skip verse 6. But Abraham said unto Sarah, behold, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as it please you. And when Sarah dealt harshly with her, she fled from her face. So that means she got out of there and she left in a hurry, because the Bible said she fled. But I want you to mark Abraham, because I didn't draw the spotlight on him, but he didn't do anything to bring peace in this situation. He just sat by and let this happen. And I'm going to take up more on this thought as we move progress further on in the lesson. And he said, Hagar, Sarah maid. Now she's has run out of the house. I'm sorry, I skipped the verse. This woman has run out of the house. She's pregnant, and she's fleeing from this mistress who has dealt harshly with her. And the angel of the Lord found her in verse 7 by a fountain of water in the wilderness. by the fountain in the way of Shur. So she was headed towards Egypt. And in verse 8, he said to her, Hagar, Sarai's maid, where come you, and whither will you go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarah. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to your mistress and submit yourself unto her hand. And the angel, in verse 10, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply your seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, you are with child, and shall bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. Whoa, now there's a lot going on right here. Remember, so she's out of the house, she's pregnant. You've seen it in our day and time. Women out, maybe domestic crisis, domestic situations, or whatever the reason, but they find themselves out there in this world, out there on these streets with nothing. Some of them, having flee from these domestic violence situations, they can't get away with nothing but the clothes on their back. Some of them are with child. But I read this again and I said, Lord God, you would have been less than a righteous God to not have come to her rescue out there in that wilderness, in that situation, without her needs being able to be met. And I want to note how he dealt with her. He appealed to her reasoning. He appealed to her thinking and her intellect. He asked her in verse 7, and the angel of the Lord found her by the fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain of the way of Sarah. And he said to her, this is it, the two questions. I want you to note and write these two questions down, because I'm going to give you an assignment from a book that I want you to read called Are You the One for Me? But that's going to come further later into the lesson here, because this is on dating and how to find your soulmate and how to get it right. But for right now, we're seeing this example, and then we see the similarities in life. And so now the angel said to Sarah, the handmaid, in verse 8, whence come you? And whither will you go? Now, these are the two questions. And I said to myself, he knew where she was because he acknowledged her as being Hagar's handmaid. But he's asking her two questions. I'm asking you two questions. And remember, the subtopic of this lesson is entitled Lessons Christian Women Can Learn from Sarah's Life. He asked her two questions. Where did you come from? And where are you going? That's critical. He caused her to think. She has run away. You're out here in the wilderness. What are you going to do? You got a baby. You don't have any food. Where are you going? She's trying to get back to Egypt. And women in those days, you pregnant without the father on the scene, you're treated harshly. You're treated very badly. And so the angel's asking where you come from and where you're going to do. What he was trying to do was make her identify where she was going and how she planned to get there, how her past life may have caused her to get to where she is. We, in our natural lives right now, when we find ourselves in tough predicaments like this, sometimes we have to ask, or sometimes we have to just say, God, I accept my responsibility in this. I take my responsibility. I take responsibility for this situation. Just take responsibility. And when you do that, you will find that those negative emotions of blame and self-pity and depression will leave, because you can't take responsibility for the situation and continue to cast blame like Sarah did. She said, my wrong be upon you. And I didn't like that. You concocted this scheme. Now an innocent girl is at stake here. But anyway, had she just said, I accept responsibility for my part, things might have been different. But what I want to focus here on in this lesson are these two questions. And you may need to make it personal. Where did you come from and where are you going? And so I made a note to myself. The angel wanted her to identify some goals. He wanted her to set up a plan. He wanted her to acknowledge, what you're going to do. And so when I looked at it, I looked at goals, and I looked up the word goals. I said a goal is a description of a destination. Goals are long-term. There are long-term outcomes that you want to achieve. A broad primary outcome. A strategy, now this is different. A strategy is an approach you take to achieve your goal. So he was trying to help her to identify your goal, and then now how you plan to get there. The Bible says she was headed towards Shur. Well, when you get there, you have nothing. What are you going to do? And so we see here that the angel kicked into the situation with a tactic. A tactic is a tool you use to pursue an objective associated with a strategy. So when you set up your objective, an objective is a measure of the progress that you need to get to a destination. A measurable step taken to achieve your strategy. So in other words, you're in a situation, I don't know if you're watching now and you're in a situation like here with Hagar and Sarah. We see this all over the earth, as I pointed out in the last part of the lesson. We see Hagar and Sarah's situations everywhere, but in our earth today, we see it in the form of divorce. We see it in the form of relationships going wrong, and we see it in the form of women a lot of times being left stranded with a child a lot of times. And so we see situations where in the earth today, where a woman give away her husband, she divorced that man, she gave him away. Now Sally Sue comes over here, puts him out of the garbage can of life and runs to make a life. And then this first wife decides what Hagar did. She changed her mind and she wanted to come back. Well, wow, there are children involved here now, and you want to get back. Well, this person's married and moved on with their life. And then this is where you can find, I'm going to call the Sarai spirit. I'm making this up. The Sarai spirit going into operation in some of these relationships. That one who threw her stuff in the garbage and the one that picked it up. Now the one that threw it away is trying to get it back. And so look at something you can identify here. It said here in verse Sarah, and Sarah, so Sarah said unto Abraham, my wrong be upon me. See, she done changed her mind. I have given my maid into your bosom. And when she saw that she conceived, I was despised in her eyes. And the Lord judged between me and you. And Abraham told her to do what she will with her. And I will get back to that later. And so we see that she changed her mind. Now she had changed her mind, but this girl is out in the cold. Now she wants to make a comeback, Sarah, the Sarai spirit. And this is happening in the earth. That's why I'm bringing it out. This is real, people. These type of things go on in the earth all the time. But if you notice, she said to the angel that she was, that she had fled from her mistress because she dealt harshly. She dealt harshly with her. And sometimes that first will get into harshness with the second. And sometimes that first won't always leave the second situation at peace. And a lot of times you can't, because there are now children involved. This woman had to go back to the house with this child and live with this woman who brutalized her and try to make this life. Now, you know that was bad, but we see it still here in the earth today, where the first wife kicked them out, the second one picked them up. Now there are children involved, and then maybe she's got children too. Now he's caught in the middle, and so this is why I said in that last lesson, divorce is not the answer, people, because when there are children involved on both sides, he's got to have access to the child that's over here. and he's got to have access to the child that's over there. So he's really caught in the middle. And so the first might be a little bit upset about this and start being nasty in the life of the second, or just being nasty just to make it bad. I'm saying all this because I told you in the last lesson, I wish I put the scripture up on the screen where Jesus told them, if not, to marry one that has a living spouse. And he didn't say why. And a lot of times he'll tell us not to do something and he won't say why. And you don't always find out why until then, after you stepped into it. Then you see all of the baby mama drama. Then you see all the baby daddy drama, because that pendulum, as I said to you, it swings both ways. And he's not going to necessarily be a happy camper about his child being now here somewhere where he is not, and someone else over them, with all the stuff that's going on in the world today. So you can see why it was important to spend more time on this talk today, because this is very real. And I'm doing this because I want to see you, the young women, I want to see you win. I want to see you take these two questions. Where did you come from and where are you going? Sit down, identify your values, what's important to you. Make it like a resume. Set up your objective. That's why I use the word objective in the setting up of the answering of these two questions. We make resumes all the time, but this time I want you to make a resume for yourself. Set up your objective. Identify what it is that you hope to achieve. Remember, an objective is a measurable steps of progress that is needed to get to a destination. So take your paper, identify your objective, and then your bullet points, outline how you plan to get there. Answer those two questions. I got to move on because there's a little bit more I want to share. And so here we see that Abraham, where was he? And Abraham said unto Hagar, verse 6. Now, here's what I wanted to say. Abraham didn't do anything to stop this. He didn't do anything to stop Sarah from dealing so harshly with this girl. This girl is innocent. She didn't ask for this. And Abraham said unto Sarah, behold, your handmaid is in your hand. Do to her as it please you. And when Sarah dealt harshly with her, she fled from her face. And that's what I'm saying to you. Harshness usually will get in on the scene when it's a little bit, when it's a three-party, that first wife. A lot of times, sometimes, not always, I'm not saying it's always the case, because it is not always, but I've seen a lot of this where it's happening in the earth today. And that first one meddles with the second one. I say, Lord God, Jesus, the devil used you twice. You tore up your marriage. Now you're tearing up hers, and the kids in the midst, and they all confused. But Abraham is what I want to speak about here in this verse. He didn't do anything to stop it. He said, she's in your hand. Do with her as you will. And as far as I'm concerned, he was in agreement. Abraham was in agreement. Now, you know it's bad. The first wife is gone, and now she's regained a little bit of power, preeminence here. She's gotten some influence back here, and he gets in agreement. Oh, God. Now, you know that's bad. You know you in a bad situation. You got them, you got kids. She wants them back, getting them back, and he's in agreement with that. Oh, bad. Whoa. So Abraham is at fault, but I want to show you what he did. This is showing what was in his heart. Okay, so the angel told her to go back. Okay, so we know why she probably didn't want to go back, but she went back. Remember, she grew up in Abraham's house, so she knew the order. She knew how to be obedient. And that was one of the prerequisites whereby Abraham was chosen by God. God said, because I know that he will command his household after me. But look at here. Okay, and so he tells her about Ishmael. This child is named Israel in verse 12. He said, and he will be a wild man, and his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Now, we all know that Ishmael is what we see over in the Baghdad area, Iraq area, Syria area, all those people. These are the descendants of Ishmael that got here on the earth by mistake. And in verse 13, and she called the name of the Lord that spake with her, the God that see me. For he said, now this is what she identifies her experience as, one of being God who saw me. And she said, I have also here looked after him that see me. So she heard him and she's gonna, cooperate. And so she named the name of that place, the God that see and God that hear me. In verse 15, and Hagar bare Abraham a son. And look at what Abraham did. She's back home now. And Abraham called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. That's what the angel said it would be. And the name Ishmael, we see the God that sees. And I said, whoa. If you've been following this series, Abraham was known for his tents and his altars. That means he was known for being a man of prayer. We know that Abraham was desperate to have a son. We know that they had waited 10 years. We know that he agreed with the plot to get that son. And so now, but look at what he's saying. These people, when they talk to God and when they name things, they use symbols and names to identify what they are going through. Abraham was praying, people. That's what all I'm saying, all this for, to let you know this man was praying. He wanted that baby. He wanted that son back in the house. Look at this. He said here in verse 14, verse 15, and Hagar bare Abraham a son, and Abraham called his name, which Hagar bare Ishmael. In verse 16, and Abraham was 86 years old. So he was 76 when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abraham. But my attention that I draw to you about Abraham here in this situation is, and Hagar, Abraham's son, Abraham called his name, which Hagar bare Ishmael. He called it as the angel called it. They had not seen or interacted with one another, but she told Abraham all that went on out there in the wilderness when she got back to the house, and that the baby's name was to be called Ishmael. But nonetheless, he called the child Ishmael, the God that sees and the God that hears. And I believe Abraham was a praying man. I believe he wanted to have Hagar back in the house where they all abode and where he could see over the child and that the child could be safe. And so in review, in these last few minutes, I wanted to bring some books here for your reading, because I didn't want to leave this subject open without more solutions as to what to do, because we live in this earth today and we see these type of things today, and you can prevent your own self or loved one or cousins or niece or youngster from maybe making a wrong decision. I know we tell them, oh, well, you choose your own and you do it. But now I submit to you, they need guidance so that they can have a clean slate the way God intended for it to be in the beginning. The one husband and the one wife, the one baby, and you all go on and live happily ever after. But when you compromise the scriptures, when you compromise your core values, that is the thing that you are not willing to give up or make a change on, then you open the door for an Ishmael to get into your life, something to get into your world that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And so I want you to get this book by Dr. Barbara D'Angelo, and it's called Are You the One for Me? And this is a book. She poured her soul into this book. It would be the best $7 you ever spent. She's a licensed relationship therapist, and she gave her whole life into helping families and singles dating, helping them to date with wisdom. So you want to get that book, and I'll try to get it up on the screen by Dr. Barbara D'Angelo, and follow that plan. because she's a therapist. She had 8 failed marriages, and whoa, I know you're going to back up on that. A lot of people don't want to hear from people that has failed at something, but I submit to you, failure is just as much a teacher as success is. At least she went to school and got her master's degree, and now she's got her doctorates. She's a licensed therapist, so she mastered it, and her marriage and her relationships are working well. And then she's going around the world and she's helping other people to get mastery. Now, she's not a Christian, but this is a plan. She's got a plan, people. She's answering these 2 questions. That's why I drew your attention back to these 2 questions, because if you're dating and thinking you need a plan, that's not something you just do. It's not something you just, jump up and commit to some pie in the sky. You got to be selective, and you be careful and not over anxious and not blinded by the idea of being in love. The young people, they want husbands, they want wives. We know that, but you have to be careful and you have to have a plan. So I hope that this lesson on the life of Sarah, lessons learned that Christians can learn, women can learn from the life of Sarah, will be a help to you. Go to my YouTube channel. Please, you can watch this again. Just go to Lessons Learned from Abraham, Part 4 on my YouTube channel, and you can study this again, and you will be able to carefully identify the similarities between Sarah and maybe your life or someone that you know. And you, by all means, you want to answer these 2 questions. Share this video with someone that may be trying to make a choice, because you don't want to compromise. Stay away from compromise. Make sure you are compatible with whatever it is that you're choosing, job, wife, husband, whatever it is. Make sure you are compatible. Make sure you set up an outline for yourself to live by, and to help you keep your life on course. Well, remember 1 Peter 5:7 from the Amplified Bible. God cares about you affectionately, and he cares about you watchfully. Don't forget to go to the website, KaturaJones.com.